Hello, people. My name's Craig Reed, longtime employee with the Lynyrd Skynyrd band. Actually, I guess I was a roadie, you could call me, but I started with a band as a roadie in 1973, and was with them all the way up until the airplane crash, 1974. Now, I've been on FakeBook here for a few years, and a lot of you have been asking me questions about what it was like working with Lynyrd Skynyrd, and kind of been telling y'all I was gonna start doing these podcasts. Somebody asked me to do one, and I kind of got this equipment to do it, and then that fizzled out. So Griff, a lot of people have been asking Griff questions about stuff. So Griff said, "Well, why don't you just let me ask you the questions these people have been asking me?" So I said, "All right, we can do that." And that's about as far as we've gone. We really don't know what the hell we're gonna do, but we're really just gonna have to try to have some damn fun. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But we've contacted people like Mark Frank and Kenny Peden, who were also passengers on the airplane, and they've agreed to get to share their opinions with us, and we just plan on getting other people involved and maybe take some phone calls from people calling in and ask questions and get you on the air and like I said, we're just gonna try to have some fun with this. What do you think about that, Griff?
Yeah, it may not necessarily be in perfect order as to how things happen, but I think by the time that we get finished with the podcast, we have covered a lot of ground. Um, so we'll start off close to the beginning. Like I think a good thing to ask Craig would be how he basically got started with the band. I know a lot of people probably know some a little bit about it, but there's some details that if you went into it, it might take too long. But I think Craig can run through that part in pretty quick time because you've told that story several times, Craig. So who was the first member of Lynyrd Skynyrd that you laid eyes on? And I know you didn't really know that were Lynyrd Skynyrd at the time.
Yeah, I was checking into that hotel out there in Canton, Ohio, and ran into Kevin Elson, the first, and Joe Barnes were unloading luggage out of this Econoline van, and I think Alan popped his head around. Alan and Gary and Billy all about the same time. Ask saw me standing there asking, talking to Joe and Kevin, and told him to ask me if I had any weed, So, yeah, so that's kind of how I met him, and then I just happened to be there at that hotel with him, and we partied that whole weekend, and I went to some shows there locally they did, and Ed King said, "Hey, do you think you might want a job at some point?" I partied with him and got along with him and everything, and I said, "Yeah, like doing what?" And he goes, "Well, everybody liked you. We think you're a smart enough guy and you're mechanically inclined. You said you were a mechanic and everything, so." Stuff we do that's kind of involves that kind of stuff. I think you'd be good at it. So I said, yeah, sure, whatever. So a couple weeks later, a woman called me and asked me to join her down in Atlanta because I had told her that I had ran into Leonard Skinner. She said they were playing down there at Alex Cooley's ballroom. So I went down there and met with her, and then we went to the show after being with them for a few days. I'd kind of learned the routine and how to get in and everything, and I just got in the back door through security and popped my head up and said, "Hey, Ed, how you doing?" And after the show, he went and to Ronnie and asked Ronnie if he'd give me a job, and Ronnie's kind of like, "You mean the Yankee from Ohio?" And Ed says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, like Ed, he's a nice guy and everything, but." I've got other people in Florida. I've been, offering a job and stuff. And, when I became big, you want to hire this guy from Ohio. And Ed says, yeah. So he said, "Oh, well, okay, Ed, but he better work out or I'm gonna kick your ass," you know. So basically, that's how that all started. It was just kind of a freak accident how I got on to got together with the guys.
At that point in time, um, when was it exactly that you realized that Lynyrd Skynyrd was a really popular band, and that you found out that you recognized one of their songs on the radio?
Well, after they left here, of course, that like I said, that was December the 7th, 1973. After they left here, I did a little investigating on it, actually how popular they were, and when I left, when the woman, I went down there to meet with her, um, I. I guess I was leaving here and planning on going out on the road with these guys. So
And you
it
knew
was
by
a
then they were on the radio, and you knew some of their songs at that time.
yeah. So I wasn't really sure that they were going to hire me, but like I packed them enough
Yeah,
to start
you
to
were
work.
hoping. I mean, you
So
had an idea they were then.
yeah, I was. I kind of wanted to do it. Yeah, yeah. That was kind of like pretty cool, and it sounded like a
And your first job, what was your first job that you remember?
drum roadie. I
Drum roadie. Do you remember,
yeah.
like, what was it that that you did? Let's say there had to be something that you did that they really liked, because evidently they kept you on because they really liked you. So there was some need that Craig Reed was good at, that those guys liked.
Like we talked about before, and people want to go know what Ronnie was like. One thing about Ronnie is he kind of could read people, especially if they were drinking. He could read people, and I think in the early before I knew what was going on, I think that there was plenty of times we got intoxicated together, and I don't really remember him going through his little interrogation after he got me drunk to at what questions or what he was asking me to. But I think I passed his little test or whatever, because you get somebody all greased up and you can find out who they are. I think when I was all greased up one time, he looked inside my soul and saw I was pretty cool. And Ronnie really liked me. For some reason, me and Ronnie got along really good. And I used to think it was because it was always Ronnie and Gary and Allen. And then I got with them really in the early days when Gary and Allen um, were starting to get their own lives, and Alan had some children and he had a family life, and Gary, was involved, and he was kind of didn't have anybody to hang around with, so he'd come over and hang around with me, and we did all kind of stuff, and right pretty much after I first we got back home from that first part of the tour, and then after that 1974 run, well, we went to Europe. We did a world tour and everything in 1974, and then we did the torture tour in 1975, and that was like 90 88 cities in 95 days or something. It was just
Yeah, and
totally
that
crazy.
was after you got a good rhythm and you were working with the band and you knew what you were doing, and you probably wore several hats. I mean, you started off as a drum tech, and then what other things did you do besides working with the drums?
I just really Joe Barnes did all the electronic stuff and made all the wires. There's a certain way that he made the guitar chords so that eventually I learned all this stuff. He grounded them at the amp, and then he left them open. The shielding part he left open at the guitar, but he grounded it with the ground wire at the amp, and it did something.
And
But I learned how.
he was there. He was there when you came on. You
Yeah,
met him.
Kevin Elson was
Yeah.
always the crew head of the crew when I was me and Joe and Kevin was always like the production manager and kind of like the leader of the crew, I
So it was
guess.
basically you three guys then were just
Yeah, it was
starting off
just
with.
us three.
Yeah.
Yeah, when like I told you before, when I started with Skinner, they were nothing. I mean, they didn't have nothing. I'd been married and divorced and stuff, and I had a credit card, and we had to use my credit card to get the band equipment from show to show at some of the first gigs. We had to use my credit card to get them from the gig to the gig. Seriously, we all made $5 a day.
Wow.
That's what we made.
Yeah.
We all of it, the band, the crew, everybody made $5 a day per diem.
And
And a lot of times,
I
and a lot
remember.
of times me and Gary and Alan and Billy, we'd all save our money. We wouldn't eat all day so we could go buy a bag of pot.
I remember Craig telling me a story that I think everybody had already lost their driver's license, and you pretty much had to drive them around because nobody had a valid driver's license.
I don't know.
Other
Well,
than,
I had a great big Oldsmobile Delta 88, 71 Olds Delta 88 is a big old car, and for some reason that thing wouldn't get stuck going back to the hell house. So I would round everybody up and drive everybody out to the house. This is a great big car, so I could just about get
yeah, let's
anybody
talk
around.
about the Hell House because a lot of people don't know what the Hell House was. That it was a
It
practice
was
place
it
in
was
Green
a
Cove Springs, Florida. And
Yeah, it was the house where they practiced, and it was a hell house. It was hotter than hell. There was no air conditioning, and it was right on the swamp. I mean, there was gators, and I mean, right out by the dock. A lot of people know where about the dock and stuff, but yeah, the gators down. Yeah, there was rattlesnakes right outside the door. Yeah, you had to. Yeah, it was.
and the first time you went there, what was your thoughts about that? Didn't you have to stay there shortly after you arrived in Florida, and you had to watch the equipment
Well,
there?
when I first got with them, it was me and Ed King and Bob Burns. We stayed at the 8 Days Inn. It was $8 a day to stay at the 8 Days Inn. So I don't remember exactly how, but everybody in the band they took turns spending the night at the Hell House because somebody had to stay there. So they took turns at who had to stay there. So um, it was Gary's time to that he had to stay there. So he didn't really want to stay, and I like I said, I was staying at the 8 Days Inn, and I said, well, shit, Gary, I'll just stay out here. It ain't no big deal. It's just and so he was so happy he didn't have to stay out there. He went and pulled a psilocybin mushroom out from under a cow turd and gave it to me, and Ronnie handed me a 22 rifle and said, "Here you go." So I ate that mushroom and sat out there
And
with
for a
that.
guy from Ohio staying in the swamp in Florida, that had to be kind of a
Well, I
rush.
didn't really bother me that much. I guess it scared the shit out of it when that was Ed King's nomination when he
Oh
first got
yeah.
with the band. He had to stay out at the Hell House, and he was from California, and I don't think he wasn't too fond of that kind of atmosphere, though. No.
Yeah, but typically, like, and a lot of people, I think they want to know. I know you told me that there weren't a lot of people allowed at the Hell House while they were practicing, but you were there, and like a typical day at the Hell House when they were practicing, and how Ronnie came up with songs. What would be a typical day there, Craig, at the Hell House?
It started at 8 o'clock in the morning every morning. I mean, from where all the guys lived, it was a good 45 minute ride out to the Hell House, and they tried to start pretty much promptly around 8 o'clock, and they worked all the way because it was cooler, I guess, during that in the mornings, you know. And so they would work all day up until 4 o'clock at night, and then they would all be home about 5 o'clock at night. But they would work all day out there, every day, like clockwork. And even when during the first tours in 1974, we would be out on the road for a couple months, and we'd go home, and we had 3 days off, and we were right back in that hell house,
Wow.
until we were back on the road, and it was just that's just the way it was.
And was it, you think it was Ronnie, being the leader of the band? He was pretty
Yeah,
strict about
without
that,
without
right?
Ronnie, without like we talked about before, without Ronnie, that he was the leader of that band. He was the heart and soul of Lynyrd Skynyrd. But like we said before, without Gary and Alan, none of he needed them as much as they needed him. Ronnie would still be selling car parts, and Gary and Alan would still be delivering flowers, and Leon would still be selling ice cream. You know.
Yeah. As somebody that was there and a witness to how Ronnie created and wrote songs, what was it that you saw that Ronnie did? Was it that he would watch the guys play and then he would tell them, "Hey, I like that," or what was his style of writing, and how did he come up with these lyrics and things?
He picked people's brains. He did. He would always say, "God, Craig, you know, I get in trouble at home for these songs I write. You know, Whiskey Rock and Roller and On the Hunt." And my wife goes, "Where are you coming up with these all these lyrics? You know?" And oh well, these guys tell me, you come up with anything you can, but it's like Ed King said, what was Ronnie like? Any six of Ronnie's songs, just listen to any six of his songs, and you just described Ronnie. It it'd really be hard to describe Ronnie. It would take a whole book just to describe. And then you don't never know what's inside somebody. There's stuff in there that you don't know about, so it's really hard to say, well, what was somebody like, but I would hope that Ed King's book would come out. So I'm sure that he tried to analyze Ronnie in
Yeah.
his own words. I would love to see Ed's book, but still
And
in
for
the works.
somebody like me thinking about a guy like Craig Reed being around these guys, and one question that I've been asked several times is like, when you were there, did you witness the creation of any song, of any one song that really sticks in your mind, like a song that Ronnie came up with,
Well, the
and
first
you
one,
and you saw him come up with the lyrics, and actually the
yeah,
song was born in front of you?
yeah, right away, Ed King, because Ed King kind of hired me, so I was kind of hung around with Ed at first, and we went to L.A. and we went to his friend's house, Mike Porter, and he was a drummer. And Ed really wasn't fond of the way of Ed or Bob Burns' drumming. He thought he was off meter, so he wanted to do the song "I Need You." So he went to Mike Porter, and I went over there with him, and they worked on that song in Mike's basement. And then we went back to the studio, and Ed showed him this song, and I swear it wasn't 20 minutes that Ronnie had that song to. He had every word to "I Need You" down,
Wow.
and
Yeah,
just
that's
just listening to, and it just blew me away, man, because that's a really cool song, But just to see it from a bit, because Ed played bass and guitar, and Mike played drums, and they put down a basic track, and then Ronnie listened to that and wrote the words to it. Yeah, that was the first one, but I was there in the studio for all of them. I mean,
was there any point in time that you were like riding in a car and you'd be going down the road and you'd hear this Lynyrd Skynyrd song come on the radio and you'd go, son of a bitch, I was there when they wrote that song,
Yeah, I think I told you about, Ronnie. He come up to me with the song "You Got That Right," and he was wondering about the words, when it comes to a fix, not afraid to fight. You got that right. And he didn't, at that time, he didn't have that down pat yet. And he says, "What do you think I should put in there?" And I said, "When it comes to a fix, I like to fight." And he goes, "Yeah, I kind of like that too, but I'm getting kind of a reputation like Jesse James, And he goes, I don't want a reputation as a fighter. I want a reputation as a singer, and I don't want to be out there on the road having people come after me trying to take, build on my reputation as thinking I'm a fighter, So, I want to shy away from that, being that direct with it,
I remember one story you told me it had to do with Neil Young sending Ronnie some lyrics.
Yeah, Ronnie handed me these papers. He goes, "Read this." And I went, "It don't make no sense." He goes, "Neil Young sent me this shit, and he said he's writing songs, and is he fucking with me?" And then Neil came out with that really bizarre album. I don't know which one it was, but yeah, Neil sent him just crazy words,
Well, that should answer the question a lot of people have about, were Neil Young and Ronnie Van Zant actually friends? Of course, you see Ronnie wears that T-shirt with Neil Young on it, so they did have some collaborations together, and who knows, maybe later on, if Ronnie would have lived, they probably could have got together with something. But yeah, we're going to go over a lot of these things. There's more things in detail that I'm going to ask Craig questions and things like that. That we're going to dissect a lot of the stories that Craig's got in his brain. I'm gonna try to help pull them out, and we try to keep these podcasts down to a minimum. We don't want to make them too long and bore anybody. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. And I think we got a lot of information covered. And I think we'll come back with some more good information that I'll get, like maybe from some of the fan clubs that we might want to talk about. So let's call it a wrap, Craig.
All right, that's a wrap. Cut.